moving on, you're going to go down the driver's side of the vehicle because you're basically just doing a circle around the vehicle. You would start with this front tire. The tires are the second biggest section of what you have to memorize other than the things in the engine. These were the two most difficult and most intense where you have to remember all the little terms. So really concentrate on those areas. So what you would do is you'd start by the outside of the tire and you're going to work your way into the middle. So I would start by looking at the tread of the tire, and on the front wheels it has to be 4/32 of an inch. So you don't have to touch it, you're just going to motion. So I'd say I would check the tread of the tire, I would check that it was 4/32 of an inch, I would check that the tread was worn evenly, that it wasn't uneven, I would check the inflation of the tire, and I would check that all 4 tires were the same type. They want to make sure that the tires are the same type of tire. You would also say I would make sure that there was no cracks or holes or damages or repairs done to the tire. So that's everything that you need to know for the tire. Then you're going to move in. You would go to the rim. You would say I would check the rim to make sure it wasn't cracked, worn, or damaged. That's something you're going to say a lot, cracked, worn, or damaged. So I would check the rim to make sure it wasn't cracked, worn, or damaged, and I would also check that it wasn't rusty, indicating looseness. After that, you're going to move in more to the lug nuts. I'd make sure that the lug nuts were all there, that they were secure, that they weren't cracked, worn, or damaged, and I would make sure that they weren't rusty, indicating looseness. So same with the rim. I would check the air valve. I would make sure that the cap was on securely, and I would check the fullness of the tires with the air pressure gauge. That's what they want to know, that you'd use this with the air pressure gauge. So moving on to the inside of the tire, this is going to be the things you can't really see, so you're going to just motion to it. You would check the brake drum. That's the metal part right here that goes around the brake, or around the tire. You'd say I would check the brake drum to make sure it wasn't cracked, worn, or damaged. I would make sure that it hadn't been previously repaired, because that's not allowed. That would put the vehicle out of commission. And then you would move on to the brake lining. You can't see that one either, but it's like in the same family as the brake drum. So you'd say I'd check the brake drum, then I'd check the brake lining. The brake lining has to be at least 1/4 of an inch thick. They don't want the brake lining too thin because you need enough of the pad. Then you'd also check the brake hoses. You'd make sure that all the hoses were attached. You don't actually do it, you just say. I'd make sure all the brake hoses were attached, that they weren't cracked, worn, or leaking. So from that point, you would move on to the suspension of the vehicle, which is going to be on the inside. You can't see any of this, so you're just going to motion some more. So you'd say, I would check the shock absorbers. I would check that they were mounted securely, that they weren't cracked, worn, or leaking. And then you would also check the mounts, the U-bolts, the springs, the leaf springs, and all of the torque arms. So those are just something that you're going to have to memorize and name off. You don't have to touch them. And you would say, I would make sure that all of those pieces weren't cracked, worn, broken, or leaking. I think that's it for the tire.
Seals. The hub seal or whatever.
Yes. So the difference between the front tire and the back tire when you're repeating yourself is going to be the tread. The front has to be 4/32 of an inch. The back only have to be 2/32 of an inch. And then the one other difference, so there's 2 differences that you have to memorize for the tires that's going to be different. So it's the tread amount, and then it's the different seals. So the front tire, you have to say that you would check the hub oil seal, and you would make sure that it wasn't leaking, damaged, or cracked. The hub oil seal, I remember that one because we're close to the oil in the front of the vehicle, whereas the axle seal, the other one, is on the back tire. So when you're doing the tires, make sure that you say on the front tire, because this is a super important one, they'll dock you, you have to say, I would check the hub oil seal. And when you get to the back tire, you would do everything the same, except the tread is different, the amount of tread, and you'd have to say, and I would check the axle seal to make sure it wasn't cracked or damaged or loose or anything like that.